Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished listeners, when a young voice rises in the chamber of the international community and speaks in tones of urgency and defiance, the world cannot help but turn its attention. For decades, the Great Assembly has been the stage of carefully crafted speeches, measured in diplomatic language and couched in phrases designed to avoid discomfort. Yet every so often, a leader appears who discards caution, who abandons the practiced rhythm of diplomacy, and instead delivers words that sound like a warning bell. In that moment, the world listens, not because it chooses to, but because the voice compels it to. Imagine the shock that follows when the rhetoric of the powerless does not tremble, but commands. When the youngest of leaders, carrying the weight of a nation that has often been dismissed as peripheral, stands before the most powerful institutions of the earth and issues what sounds like an ultimatum. Not an appeal, not a petition, not a negotiation, but a demand with a timeline, a declaration that the patience of the overlooked has reached its end. The assembly grows quiet, for such language is rarely heard in that hall. The question emerges instantly: can this be real? And if so, what does it mean? An ultimatum in international politics carries tremendous weight. It is not merely a strong word, it is a line in the sand. History shows us that ultimatums have preceded wars, but they have also precipitated peace. They create moments of decision, when hesitation is no longer possible and when the costs of inaction are made stark. For a young leader from Africa to frame his stance in such terms before the world's assembled nations is to reverse centuries of expectation. Where once voices from the continent were treated as supplicants seeking assistance, here the tone is one of confrontation, urgency, and self-respect. This reversal unsettles some, inspires others, and forces everyone to reconsider their assumptions. The substance of the ultimatum matters less in this moment than the symbolism it carries. To direct a demand toward a conflict in another region of the world is to declare that the global South has a voice, that Africa is not a silent spectator in the struggles of others, and that moral authority is not confined to those with wealth or weapons. It is to insist that justice must be universal, that the pain of one people cannot be ignored while the suffering of another is condemned, and that global governance must serve all humanity rather than a privileged few. The idea of a 48-hour timeline captures imagination precisely because it defies the usual tempo of diplomacy. Negotiations at the global level often drag on for months or years, bogged down by procedural maneuvering and endless consultations. To demand action within 2 days is to expose the inertia of the system, to highlight its inability to respond quickly to crises, and to embarrass those who hide behind bureaucracy while lives are lost. Whether or not such a demand is practical, its rhetorical effect is undeniable. It forces audiences to confront the gap between urgent suffering and sluggish diplomacy. Critics will say that such language is reckless, that it undermines the delicate balance of negotiation, and that it risks escalating tensions. They will argue that ultimatums are the language of conflict, not of peace, and that to wield them in a global forum is to invite ridicule or dismissal. Yet supporters will counter that, without bold speech, the world sleeps. Without deadlines, injustice lingers indefinitely. Without those willing to shatter the decorum of politeness, the victims of violence remain invisible. In this tension between caution and courage, between procedure and passion, lies the true drama of such a moment. The reaction within the hall would be as divided as the world itself. Some would applaud not because they expect the ultimatum to be obeyed, but because they see in it a voice of dignity and resistance, a refusal to remain silent. Others would sit in discomfort, wondering how to respond without lending credibility to what they consider an upstart's challenge. Still others would dismiss it outright, labeling it theater. But whether applauded, condemned, or ignored, the words would linger. They would echo across news channels, trend on social media, and be debated in cafes, classrooms, and parliaments far beyond the chamber. For the citizens of the leader's own nation, the speech would carry even deeper significance. To see their representative address, the most powerful with such boldness, would be a source of pride, a validation that their country matters. It would reinforce the sense that they are no longer marginal, no longer voiceless, no longer condemned to watch history unfold without them. It would give them a stake in the global conversation and a belief that they too can shape the course of events beyond their borders. At the same time, such boldness carries risks. The issuing of ultimatums without the means to enforce them can invite ridicule, and ridicule can weaken credibility. A balance must therefore be struck between symbolic defiance and practical diplomacy. The challenge is to ensure that bold speech is backed by consistent action, that the rhetoric of urgency is not followed by silence, and that the energy of confrontation is channeled into constructive influence. Otherwise, the drama of the moment risks becoming a fleeting spectacle, remembered only as a headline rather than a turning point. Nevertheless, the very act of shocking the assembly has value. It disrupts the monotony of predictable speeches, recenters attention on urgent injustices, and challenges the hierarchy of whose voices matter most. It reveals that even a nation with limited resources can command attention if its representative dares to speak without fear. And it underscores a deeper truth, that moral authority is not measured by economic output or military power, but by the courage to demand justice when silence is easier. Ultimately, the meaning of such a moment is not in whether the ultimatum was realistic, but in the fact that it was spoken at all. It reflects a new confidence among emerging leaders of the global South, a willingness to confront the powerful, and an insistence that the era of passive observation is over. Whether the Assembly obeys the demand or not, the world has been reminded that voices once dismissed as peripheral can now set the agenda, however briefly. And in that reminder lies a quiet but profound shift, the recognition that no corner of the globe can be ignored, and that even the youngest leaders can stun the world with words that force us all to think again.